بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد
وآله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني من نور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Alhamdulillah, we have tawfiq to continue our discussion of 40 hadith, and tonight I am in Lopiano in Italy, and remember the time we were together here in April and December 2018. So your place is missed here. The hadith was about tafakkur and salatul layl and taqwa. So still we have remaining from the discussion about tafakkur, and then inshallah we talk about salatul layl. So one of the ranks or levels of contemplation is to think about our soul, our nafs, and its conditions. And in particular, Imam Khomeini wants to refer to two consequences and outcomes or fruits of this contemplation. One is to come to the understanding that there must be resurrection, because our nafs is immaterial, it's mujarrad, it's not going to be destroyed by death. And the other is need for resurrection and revelation and prophethood in general. So here he refers to these two important consequences. So first, let us establish what is the main outcome of thinking about our nafs. He says that one of the outcomes that brings lots of positive things is to understand that we are mujarrad, we are immaterial. Our body is material, but it's not what makes us us. Our reality, our identity, our personality is not made by our body, it's made by our spirit or soul. And he says philosophers have never paid attention to any point as they have paid attention to this issue of nafs and proving immateriality of nafs, because this is the basis of many things. And he says we are not here supposed to go into detailed discussion about nafs and bringing all arguments that are presented to prove immateriality of nafs. But he says very briefly we can mention something that is easy to understand and would help everyone to acknowledge that nafs is mujarrad, is not material, it's not physical or corporeal. He says all medical doctors, all people who are specialized in human anatomy and they know the way our body works, they know and agree that all parts of our body from the age of 30, 35, they start going into decline. You feel little by little weakness in your body. وَمَنْ نُعَمِّرْهُ نُنَكِّسْهُ فِي الْخَلْقِ. Even Allah says that the one that we give him long life, he would become weak in his physical creation. So you all feel that. Those of you who have reached the age of 35, 40, you would realize that how you become tired sooner, you become weak, and this is about every physical part. But what is interesting is that at the same time that your physical strength is going to decline, your intellectual understanding and your spiritual power become stronger. They develop into more advanced levels. So if our nafs and its power for thinking, for virtues and vices were based on physics, based on our physical body, then this cannot be explained. Why, when we go into decline in our body and bodily power and bodily organs, our intellectual understanding becomes better. Our virtues and vices become stronger. This shows that nafs has connection with body and lots of interactions with body, but it's separate from body. And it has its own way of growing and continuing. And even if you say that when we become old, our fikr, our thinking is affected. Sometimes we don't have that bright and fast way of understanding or thinking and arguing that we used to have. He says, actually, fikr and thinking is one of those things that our nafs does it very much in connection with body. In philosophy, we say nafs, human soul, is mujarradun zatan wa maddiyun fi'la. Nafs is immaterial in soul, but it needs body in its functions. So anything which is closer to the essence of nafs is more free from influence of body. Anything which is more a matter of action of nafs, while we are in this world, it depends on human body. Unless your nafs grows and becomes stronger and independent from your body, so that can carry on without body after death, or even for some people, their nafs can function free from the limitations of body. They can see something where their eyes cannot see. They can move things where their hands cannot move. But for most of people, it is their body that limits and defines the power of nafs. But if instead of thinking and arguing, you think about our intellectual capacity or our spiritual power or our virtues, which are positive qualities of our nafs, or even for someone who is going to wrong direction, the vicious qualities, they don't become weaker. The more you age, the older you become, they also become stronger. So this shows that nafs is different from body, and nafs is not corporeal or physical. Another thing is that any gist, any physical object takes only one form of alternative forms at each time. So it cannot be, for example, a water cannot be liquid and steam and solid at the same time, for example. Or if you have a piece of paper, you cannot have different paintings at the same time on it. One has to come after the other. Or different colors. You cannot make it completely white and completely brown and completely green. But when it comes to nafs, our nafs is able to imagine, or you can say, to create mental images. I mean by imagine, to create mental images of alternative forms or surah, and there is no problem in thinking at the same time about water and ice and steam, or to have many things at the same time in your thinking. There is no problem. Also, in the real physical world, when something is gone, then you cannot bring it back as you wish. If, for example, something was ice and melted and became water, then it doesn't become automatically ice again unless you freeze it. But in our nafs, the previous images that we had sometimes can come anytime. You used to think about something yesterday, and all of a sudden today the same thing comes to your mind without having any cause from outside that can explain that. So our nafs has its own rules and regulations, and the way it functions is not the way that a physical object functions. So nafs is immaterial, and because this is immaterial, so it's not going to finish by death. Death is just departure of the soul from body, or disconnection between soul and body. Therefore our soul continues, and therefore we believe that there must be another life. And this is enough to refute the idea of those who deny resurrection altogether. We are not going to discuss details, but just to say that we need to have another life. We need to believe in continuity of human spirit. Also, because nafs has its own health or illnesses, its own good condition or bad conditions, its own illnesses, its own health, its own virtue and vicious qualities. Therefore, we need God the Almighty, who is the only one who knows our nafs and different conditions of nafs, to come and help us. We are in need of guidance, and He is the only one who can help us in this, because He has created this and He has knowledge, and no one has enough knowledge about our nafs. And if God has created us and He is wise, He needs to guide us, as we have been discussing in Aqad, the idea of hidayat amme, general guidance. It's impossible to imagine that a wise person does something in vain, or does something and leave it half the way. If He created us, then He Himself should show us the path. الذي خلق فسوى والذي قدر فهدى. Creation and hidayah. Or when Pharaoh asked Musa, وَمَنْ رَبُّكُمَا يَا Musa, who is your Lord, Musa, Harun? He said, رَبُّنَا الَّذِي أَعْطَى كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلْقَهُ ثُمَّ هَدَى. Our Lord is the one who created everything and then guided. So we need in each age a person to be able to receive directly divine guidance in the form of revelation. But sometimes this takes few centuries to find another person who is qualified. Or sometimes, for example, at one age we can have more than one. So it's not guaranteed that in a matter of every few years we would have some prophet, or in a matter of every few kilometers we would have one prophet. We need well-prepared souls to be ready to receive revelation. Sometimes there were tens of prophets living at the same time, and sometimes there was a gap for centuries. But what is important is that God never left any nation without guidance. لَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رسولا. We have sent and dispatched to all nations messengers. And when it comes to then Islam, Imam Khomeini says that we can use an argument similar to argument from design to say that this Sharia is the most complete and up-to-date. He says, what is the core of the argument from design? Burhan al-Nazm. The argument is mainly a matter of establishing existence of design in the world in its different ways that we have explained in Islamic belief system, whether it's a matter of order or connectedness or purposefulness, 3 dimensions. And then we say that this design cannot be existing without having an intelligent, knowledgeable, powerful designer. He comes to Islamic Sharia and he says in Islamic Sharia, when it comes to aqaid and akhlaq and fiqh, we have the most detailed, the most comprehensive and deepest ways of dealing with aqaidi issues, akhlaqi issues and fiqhi issues. Nothing is left out. And he says this cannot be like, the order in the world, the magnificence of the world cannot be without a designer. So this Sharia with these 3 comprehensive and deep and detailed and far-reaching aspects cannot come without having a designer, a lawmaker, a shari' who has knowledge and power and wisdom. That is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet, who was himself unschooled and lived in a situation that was a situation of having no schools, no seminaries, no universities, no libraries, no teachers. He could not have himself come to this kind of comprehensive religion. In the same way that design in the world cannot come to exist by chance, an accident or explosion, we cannot also explain how this faith with such deep aqaid and akhlaq and comprehensive sharia has come to existence by chance, for example, and just accidentally a person, a human being who is unschooled has started teaching all this. It must come from the same person who has designed the world, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then Imam Khomeini moves on to talk about the second part of the hadith, which is about Salatul Layl. Jafi'an al-layl jambak. Try to get up in the night from your bed. And he says, we have many hadiths recommending Salatul Layl. And he says, our imams, our scholars and masters, our great teachers, they all have told us to be very much attentive to Salatul Layl, or even to be attentive to the end of night, even if it's not something that is preoccupied with ibadah, with worship. So basically we have 2 things. One is significance of night, especially the last part, and trying to keep awake. And second is to do ibadah in that part. But even if someone is just awake, get some of the blessings of night. He says in Wasa'il al-Shia by the late Hurra Amali, which is one of our greatest And he says, indeed, أعظم كتب إمامية. He says it's the greatest book among our Imami scholars, and our fuqaha very much use it, and it's the major source that fuqaha refer frequently to. He says there are 41 hadiths about the merits of Salatul Layl, and few hadiths about the fact that not saying Salatul Layl is makruh, is disliked, and also there are other hadiths. And he says if you want to bring all the hadiths, it's like almost, he says, beyond our capacity to bring all of them. Then he mentions some of these hadiths. One is from Kafi. So Vasal Shia from Kafi by Sheikh Khulaini. He quotes through his chain of narration from Muawiyah ibn Ammar, who says, سمعت أبا عبد الله عليه السلام يقول, I heard Imam Sadiq عليه السلام saying, يقول, he said, I heard Imam saying, كان في وصية النبي صلى الله عليه وآله لعلي. It was in the will of the Prophet for Imam Ali. So things that the Prophet advised Imam Ali. يا علي أوصيك في نفسك بخصال فاحفظها. O Ali, I advise you few things about yourself, and you should preserve them. And then he said, Allahumma a'inhu. O Allah, please help Ali to preserve this and practice this. So in that wasiyah, then the Prophet reaches this point. وَعَلَيْكَ بِصَلَاةِ اللَّيْلِ وَعَلَيْكَ بِصَلَاةِ اللَّيْلِ وَعَلَيْكَ بِصَلَاةِ اللَّيْلِ. 3 times Rasulullah said to Amir al-Mu'mineen, you must be making sure that you do Salatul Layl. Be concerned about Salatul Layl. Be committed to Salatul Layl. Practice Salatul Layl. So this shows how important it is that Rasulullah says this to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam and repeats this. In Khisal by Sheikh al-Saduq, we have a hadith again from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. قال قال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله لجبرائيل عظني. Rasulullah said to Jibreel to preach me, advise me. فقال يا محمد. Then Jibreel alayhi salam told the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, O Muhammad, إِشْ مَا شِئْتَ فَإِنَّكَ مَيِّتٌ. Live as you like, but know that you are going to die. Remember all the time that you are going to die. This gives you a different approach to life. وَأَحْبِبْ مَا شِئْتَ فَإِنَّكَ مُفَارِقُ. Love whatever you like, but you are going to leave it and separate from it. So see, what are the things that you want to love that have the value of being loved, and maybe you can keep them for yourself, not loving something that is going to perish. وَأَعْمَلْ مَا شِئْتَ فَإِنَّكَ مُلَاقِي. Do whatever you like, but know that you are going to meet your action. Your action is going to be presented to you. And then Jibreel said to the Prophet, وَعْلَمْ أَنَّ الشَّرَفَ الْمُؤْمِنِ قِيَامُهُ بِاللَّيْلِ وَعِزُّهُ كَفُّهُ عَنْ إِعْرَاضِ النَّاسِ. Be aware that the honor of mu'min, honor of believer, is to stand up in the night for ibadah, and also not to be concerned about possessions of people, not to have any expectation from people. If you have expectation from people, then this would damage your honor internally and externally. You would become mean, and also people would not like someone who has expectation from them, or has, feels that he has some right in their possession. So Salatul Layl is one of the things that secures our honor and dignity. course, it's in dunya, but more in akhirah, because that's where we need honor most. There is hadith that Ibn Abbas quotes, that Rasulullah said, فَمَنْ رُزِقَ صَلَاةَ اللَّيْلِ مِنْ عَبْدٍ أَوْ أَمَةٍ قَامَ لِلَّهِ مُخْلِصًا وَتَوَضَّأَ وُضُوءًا صَادِقًا وصلى لله عز وجل بنية صادقة وقلب سليم, and in some versions وبدن خاشع وعين دامعة, وبدن خاشع is in some versions, وعين دامعة جعل الله تعالى خلفه 7 صفوف من الملائكة في كل صف ما لا يحصي عددهم إلا الله أحد طرفي كل صف بالمشرق والآخر بالمغرب فإذا فرغ كتب الله عز وجل له بعددهم درجات. Ibn Abbas says that Rasulullah said, whoever is given the blessing of Salatul Layl, a man or woman who stands up for Allah with pure intention and makes a good wuzu, wuzu that you really make water flow on your face, for example, hand, and refresh yourself with this wuzu, refresh spiritually with this wuzu, and then he or she says prayer for the sake of Allah with sincere intention and pure heart and humble body and crying eye, Allah would make 7 rows of angels to say prayer behind him. And in every row, there are so many angels that no one apart from Allah can count. One side of the row is in the east, another side part is in the west. So you will not be alone. And then when he finishes this Salatul Layl, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would write for him, register for him ranks equal to the number of those angels. So basically it means that when someone in night stands up for prayer with fresh heart, with open heart, with sincerity, and the eyes are crying, and the body is humble, and heart is healthy from illnesses, such person, the whole creation is appreciative, and many angels would back him up and stand behind him, and he would so much benefit from this salat that his rank will go very high. And imagine if this continues for every night, what can happen. Then he quotes some other hadiths about Salatul Layl that I think, in order to digest these hadiths more, I leave the rest inshallah for the next session. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq to do tafakkur, contemplate, but also to do tahajjud. Although tafakkur, even if it is for 1 hour, is better than ibadah of 1 year or 60 or 70 years. But then if this tafakkur is done with Salatul Layl, and you wake up and in a contemplative manner pray or contemplate on your sajjada, then no one can imagine how much you are going to gain. May Allah inshallah give us tawfiq for continuously inshallah doing this. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin.